Welcome to Life Lessons from Dog. I'm Kari Solberg. For over 12 years, I've been immersed in the world of dogs, with 10 of those years being dedicated to professional training. My journey has taken me from fostering rescue dogs to owning and operating a boarding, training, and daycare facility. Along the way, I've discovered something profound. Our dogs are some of the best teachers we'll ever have. Through countless experiences, I've learned life-changing lessons from the dogs I've worked with. Lessons about patience, trust, resilience, and connection. But today we're diving into one of the most transformative lessons I've learned, setting boundaries. And like so many other lessons, it came through the persistent, subtle nudging of one very special dog. Let me start by saying that boundaries have never come naturally to me. Like so many people, I've struggled to identify my lack of boundaries with humans. I've rationalized behavior, made excuses, and avoided confrontation, all in the name of maintaining relationships. But thank goodness for dogs. Crosby, in particular, is a master at testing boundaries, my boundaries to be exact. He's taught me more about this topic than I ever wanted to know, and it started in the most unexpected ways. When I began to expand my training experience, Crosby was my go-to dog for classes and workshops. He was great in social settings, eager to participate in activities like agility, and generally pretty manageable. Except for one thing, Crosby would refuse to work for me. If you've ever trained your own dog, you've probably experienced this to some degree. You show up ready to learn, but your dog seems more interested in anyone and everything else. It's frustrating and at times embarrassing. And Crosby wouldn't just ignore me. He would work beautifully for other people in class and then completely blow me off when it was my turn to take the lead. I didn't immediately recognize this as a boundary issue, of course, and even now as I talk about it, it doesn't necessarily scream, "He walks all over you." I tell my clients all the time, I've been in your shoes, and I mean it. Every one of my dogs has challenged me in some way, and rarely has it been in fun or easy ways. Crosby was, is, and always will be a sneaky boundary pusher. By all accounts, Crosby was a well-behaved dog. He walked nicely on a leash, came when I called, and was exactly what many of my foster dogs needed in order to get ready for their forever home. But there was an underlying dynamic I didn't recognize at first. Crosby was managing our environment and very subtly asserting control in ways that flew under my radar for years. All the way up until I had a particularly pushy foster dog in the house that was occupying more time and energy than most had. One night, I crawled into my bed only to discover that Crosby had peed on it during the day. It was his not-so-subtle way of saying, "This is my bed, not yours, and I am frustrated." That wake-up call was the beginning of a series of headbutts between Crosby and I. I immediately revoked his furniture privileges and instilled more structure in our relationship. And he started pushing back in other areas, ignoring commands, refusing to work for me in class, and testing me at every turn. To be clear, I'm not one to anthropomorphize my dogs, but Crosby's behavior felt like the canine equivalent of flipping me off. Eventually, though, we worked through it. Crosby learned that I wouldn't give in, and I learned to accept him for who he is, boundary pusher and all. Before we dive into the next section, I want to take a moment to thank you for listening and remind you to subscribe to the podcast if you're enjoying these lessons and stories. Subscribing ensures you won't miss an episode as we continue exploring how dogs teach us to navigate life with purpose and intention. You can also connect with me on Blue Sky and TikTok at Life Lessons from Dog, where I share more insights, reflections, and behind-the-scenes stories from the canine world. Your support helps this podcast grow, so if you're finding value here, consider sharing it with a friend or leaving a quick review. It makes a big difference. Now let's get back to the episode and talk about how dogs help us strip away the emotional complexity of boundaries to see things more clearly. What I didn't realize at the time was how much this process with Crosby mirrored my relationships with people. As a lifelong people pleaser, advocating for myself and holding boundaries has gone against everything in my nature. But going through the discomfort of redefining my relationship with Crosby showed me that it was not only possible to set boundaries, it was imperative that I did. The truth is, when we don't set boundaries, it takes a toll. Toxic relationships, whether with dogs or people, create stress, frustration, and resentment. They occupy space in our lives that could be filled with healthier, more fulfilling connections. And here's the thing. By learning to hold boundaries, we don't just improve our own lives. We model that behavior for others. Whether we realize it or not, we all have people in our lives that are taking note of what we do. Every action we take can inspire them to make changes in their own lives, and subtle changes like this have the power to change the world. One of the reasons I believe dogs are such powerful teachers is that they strip away the emotional complexity we bring to human relationships. When a dog pushes a boundary, while sometimes it can initially feel that it is, it's not personal. It's not about your worth or your history together. It's just a behavior. And when a person pushes a boundary, it's easy to get caught up in the stories we tell ourselves. I don't want to lose this relationship. What does this say about me? What if I'm the problem? Establishing boundaries with dogs gives us a unique opportunity to practice without the weight of the emotional baggage. It allows us to observe the behavior for what it truly is, free from the complex narratives we often attach in human relationships. In this safer space, we can learn to advocate for ourselves, set clear expectations, and experience the results without fear of judgment or rejection. In my work with clients, this lesson comes up more often than any other. And here's the interesting part. The emotions that surface are often the same as the ones we encounter in our human relationships. Frustrations, guilt, or fear of being too much. But the difference is this. Your dog isn't bothered by your emotional process. They don't hold grudges or take it personally. They simply respond to the clarity of your communication and the consistency of your follow-through. I often joke with my clients that I have a knack for making people cry during lessons. And 9 times out of 10, it's this exact lesson we're working through when those tears come. It's not just about the dog. It's about unlocking something deeper within ourselves. Once you experience it with your dog, once you see that you can hold a boundary and come out stronger on the other side, it becomes easier to do the same with people. So let me ask you this. What boundary is your dog currently testing? Is it their behavior around the house, how they interact with other dogs, or the way they respond to you in specific situations? Now, take a step back and ask yourself, how might this connect to the boundaries in your human relationships? Is there a pattern? Maybe it's one specific relationship that comes to mind. A dynamic with your kids, your spouse, a sibling, or even a coworker. Or maybe it's a recurring theme in all of your relationships, where boundaries feel blurry or difficult to maintain. What can you take from the process of setting boundaries with your dog and apply to those human connections? Is it the need for clarity and consistency? The realization that boundaries aren't about punishment, but about creating structure and respect? Or is it the courage to face the discomfort that comes with standing your ground? Ask yourself, do you need to experience the process of establishing boundaries to prove to yourself that you can do it? Do you need a space, like your relationship with your dog, where you can practice navigating the emotions that come with boundary setting, like fear, insecurity, or guilt, without fear of losing the relationship? Take a moment to really reflect. Look at the patterns in your life, in your relationships, and even in the way your dog interacts with you. The lessons are already there, waiting for you to notice them. Because sometimes all it takes to make a meaningful change is to recognize the connection between the challenges you're facing and the lessons they're offering. Boundaries, whether with dogs or people, aren't about keeping others out. They're about creating the space for healthier, more respectful relationships to flourish. Crosby taught me that boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about defining how we move through the world. They're about protecting our energy, creating space for healthy relationships, and modeling the kind of behavior we want to see in others. So the next time your dog pushes a boundary, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? And the next time someone in your life tests a boundary, remember, it's not just possible to advocate for yourself, it's of vital importance. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Kari Solberg, and I'll see you next time as we explore more lessons from the canine world and the heart of the human experience. Until then, remember, every lesson our dogs teach us has the power to change our lives, if we're willing to listen. Next week on the podcast, I'm taking you back to an unforgettable experience at the Training Caesar's Way workshop with my dog Buddy. This trip was a turning point, not just for Buddy, but for me. I'll share how I discovered my sensitivity to energy, the challenges Buddy and I faced together, and the powerful lessons we both learned about anxiety and finding balance. If you've ever struggled with overwhelming emotions, whether in yourself or in your dog, you'll want to join me as I unpack how energy shapes our actions, our relationships, and our ability to lead. I'll see you there.